Hospital Porter's pride and dignity stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanmo TV and welcome to this UFO Disclosure 2025. I know it's another one. It's the third one this year. Now, this video is going to be different to how I planned it because originally I wanted to make a longer video, but I got to the point where I realized I didn't have the time. Now, in fact, but at the same time, I realized I needed to upload something within the next 24 hours because it's been a whole week almost since my last video. I don't like leaving the channel unattended that long. If it makes you feel uncomfortable. But anyway, I am back with a video which is actually going to cover some of the information I planned for the original video that I was going to do. And I will cover the rest of the information in another video, maybe in the next week or so, or the next few days. Another UFO Disclosure 2025 video. But I just don't have time to do it all tonight, unfortunately, because the reason I haven't uploaded anything all week is because I've been extremely busy at work, more so than usual. I mean, not busy compared to being a hospital porter, but busy by the standards of the work I now do. So I've got to apologize for that already straight away. Now, a couple of points I should mention. First of all, some of you may recognize this photo behind me, and I made an entire video about it quite a long time ago, actually. I think a lot of you may not quite realize, may not remember it for that reason. But this is a photograph. You can just see my fingers disappear because I haven't got a green screen, Ben. But there's a kind of saucer-shaped object just over my right shoulder there. Do you see it up in the air? They were just there, right? Oh, I'm coming back now. That there, right? I've done an entire video on this subject. This is a photograph that I myself took. I took it in Scotland on the Firth of the Clyde when I was on a walking holiday back in 1998. And in fact, it's just over the other side of you just see there, that's actually a nuclear base. So yeah, and a lot of people think it's not a real UFO. I didn't see anything at the time, but there's no way to prove it. I've lost the negative. But anyway, I just thought I'd use that as my background because I didn't really have time to plan something better. Now, so let's get down to it, as the saying goes. Another thing you may have noticed that I have changed the wording in the title to these UFO disclosure videos, because the title of my UFO disclosure videos, ever since I first started them in 2015, I can't believe it's 10 years ago, it always goes like 2024 wasn't the year of disclosure, but could 2025 be it, or 2015, 2016, etc. Possibly, and then I go on to introduce more details about the episode. Well, I've changed you may have noticed, I'm sure some of you have noticed, you with sharp eyes, I have changed the word possibly to the word likely. It's likely that 2025 will be the year of disclosure. I mean, I know a lot of you are going to say, oh, Ben, you always say that, but I don't always say that. And I'm sure if it doesn't happen by December the 31st, you will. I'm sure many of my viewers will remind me that of this particular moment, won't you? You'll come and say, Ben, you said it was going to disclosure, and it never happened, right? I know, but I'm pretty confident that I am sort of just feel that kind of like it's for reasons I'm going to explain. I have explained an awful lot. For example, the last two UFO disclosure videos, 2025, that I've done are about like the Trump revolution. And then, of course, Steve Bassett I had on, and I'm talking to him, Whenever I talk to Steve Bassett, it's like, is it the year of disclosure? No, it's going to be the month of disclosure. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's go through let's get onto the subject matter of this particular video. And as I said, this video is I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's now almost 11:30 in the evening. I've got work tomorrow, but I just realized if I don't do this tonight, tomorrow I won't be able to do it because I'm recording with Paranormal Peep Show and I've got to do the third rail. So it'll be Tuesday at the latest I'll be able to do this, which is like more than a week without a video on my channel, and I don't like that. So let's begin with something that happened back in March. Here we go. 25th of March. Now, this is not really a UFO disclosure issue, I suppose, but there was this. I wrote about this on Hapanmo Voice, and the tiny percentage of you who read Hapanmo Voice will know this. But this is, someone said here, did anyone else see this over Calne just now? Calne is a town in Wiltshire. So that's the spiral. Now, a lot of you have seen photographs of this spiral thing. And Well, it's appeared suddenly. I was in the middle of doing something. I remember I was in the middle of something on Japanmo TV, I think, if I remember rightly. And suddenly there was this explosion on social media. I sort of like came away from it, and suddenly everyone was talking about the fact this weird spiral had been seen in the skies, very like the Norway spiral back in 2009, if you remember that one. Beautiful sort of like two-barred spiral swirling across the sky. It arrived at 8:15. The phenomenon also looks slightly different, depending on the location and the type of camera used, but all of them depict this beautiful two-barred spiral. Visible over the British Isles, most other places in Western Europe, as far south as Italy. It appeared just before 8 p.m., lasted a few minutes, then it faded. And people near where I live are reporting it as well. And unfortunately, I never saw it myself. It's because I was doing something on Japanmo TV. Oh, excuse me. Can't remember what. And there's been other examples of this. There was one in Africa. There's one in China. I've written about it. I've written about some of these things. Now, it's funny enough, there was no immediate response from the media. It was almost as if they'd been caught off guard. But then they started reporting on it hours later. And the usual prevailing explanation was brought in. And I kind of guessed it, actually. They said it was caused when a SpaceX rocket stage began venting excess fuel, which froze solid in the coldness of the upper atmosphere. And it glowed because the sun and the moonlight were hitting the ice crystals now, or the frozen fuel crystals. The spiral pattern is caused by the movement of the reusable rocket as it returns to its launch pad on Earth. And that explanation was provided by the Met Office alone. And but only the Met Office said this. SpaceX, at the time of me recording this, have yet to comment. Now, there was a launch a few hours earlier. A Falcon 9 rocket blasted off on a classified government-contracted mission. Oh, yeah. My guess is to deploy a reconnaissance satellite. It's the most obvious thing. But as always, because of the clown's day off fallacy, this theory was elevated to the status of fact instantaneously. And all the skeptics on social media were just reporting it in the same way. They had no information at all, but they just said, well, the Met Office says it's these ice crystals. SpaceX haven't confirmed that, but it doesn't involve aliens, therefore it wins by default. That's the clown's day off fallacy. But I'm quite surprised there was no reference at all to the possibility of this spectacle appearing before the spiral actually emerged. That's not like SpaceX, because generally Elon never misses a trick when it comes to drawing public attention to his products. That's how he became so successful. He knows about advertising and promotion. So you remember the Starlink satellites, for example. Be able to see something artificial in space from the Earth's surface, with the unaided eye, is a rare treat. There was a similar story for the Norway spiral. They jumped on it much quicker, though. It was apparently a missile test that went wrong because Russia launched what's called a Belava ballistic missile from a submarine in the Barents Sea, without a warhead, of course. Its engine failed, causing the missile to go into a tailspin. The spiral was apparently caused by its exhaust flying out from the rotating rocket engine in a similar effect to a Catherine wheel firework. Sometime later, more information emerged that shows that a missile failure couldn't have produced that effect. And if these spirals are not rockets, then what are they? Some people say they're portals, entrances or exits of wormholes in space-time. These can either form naturally or can be generated synthetically by advanced technology in the hands of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional civilizations. As outlandish as that sounds, some dedicated researchers have gathered evidence for it. Remember when I went to Contact in the Desert last year, the DVD I brought, Hole in the Sky, the Tear in the Sky, Dave Altman and Caroline Corey, what they discovered, the thing in the clouds with the Tic Tacs dropping out of it. I don't know if what you've just seen and this phenomenon is a part of that. I don't know, but it could be. I mean, no one has actually spotted flying saucers dropping out of that spiral, it must be said. I just kicked myself. I was cozied up indoors at the time doing something else, and I could have gone out and seen it, but I didn't. So maybe next time I'll be luckier. I don't know. Right. Now, I've called this particular video Whistleblowers Galore because there have been whistleblowers galore. It's really, I mean, these whistleblowers are like buses, aren't they? You know, none of them, you're sitting there for ages waiting for one when they don't turn up, and suddenly 3 come along all at once. Actually, 4. It's really weird because I had to redo the titles of the video because I was just preparing the titles and everything, getting ready to shoot. And it was suddenly announced there was a 4th whistleblower to come out. And I will demonstrate. Right, the first one, we'll go through these whistleblowers. Right. The first one I want to talk about is this guy called Harold Malmgren. This guy here. Now, here's some photos of him. There's some very old photos here because he's been around a long time. This is him with his daughter, who has his. She's quite pretty, I must say. She's got that kind of. She looks like Nancy Allen, very hot. And of course, I do recommend very much what I first saw about him, which is this one here. This is American Alchemy. I reckon that some of you will have seen this probably because it's been around for a few days. And I watched the whole thing, and other people have been talking about it. But I touched a UFO. But this particular video here. There we go. In loving memory of Harold Bernard Malmgren, the atomic whiz kid, yep, and who saved the world. He did. I mean, I'll go into that, but this is on Jesse Michaels' YouTube channel. This is almost 4 hours long, but it's really worth watching. It's worth watching the whole thing. There's lots of commentary on it. I mean, this is a guy I often refer to. It's Patrick of Vetted, who you've probably heard of. He's a very good source of information, I find. But yeah, Harold Malmgren was he's incredible. You got his Wikipedia page, and I'm a bit worried about his Wikipedia page because it's been listed. Someone's flagged it. Let's just have a look at it. Maybe I should actually screen cap it just in case it disappears. But here's his Wikipedia page. You can pause and read that. That's him in 1974. Whoops, that's him in 1974. But it says here, July the 13th, 1935 to February the 13th, 2025, 89 years old. When he died, actually, I say February the 13th. That was actually recorded on, this video was recorded by Jesse Michaels. That was recorded just before he died. And he was here in Oxford in the 1950s, long before I was born, but he was here in Oxford. I wonder where he lived. I wonder if there's anyone who knows him, but it talks about his early life and education. And talks about his government service here. There's nothing here about UFOs that I've seen. Here we are. In 2024, Malgren publicly claimed that the decades prior, he'd been briefed on otherworld technologies by CIA officer Richard Bissell. Yeah, we're going to go into that. That's the only sentence on here, but there's 2. You can see there are 2 references here, which are here. 41. These are the 2. These are the 2 citations here. It talks about his personal life here. But I should point out before we go any further that this when Jesse's video came out, his interview with Harold Malmgren, someone flagged the video, and I think I know who it was. And indeed, Patrick talks about this on Vetted. It was Susan Gerbich, and Susan Gerbich is the leader of the Guerrilla Skeptics, and the guerrillas, they're called guerrilla skeptics because they sort of like go underground on Wikipedia, carefully editing things for what they call factual clarity or informational correctness, and all these other things that the skeptics use. What they really mean is they're suppressing all woo-woo opinions. As you know from my skeptic video, skeptics, you know, when they switch to the prosecution bench, they're pretty good. They're pretty censorious people, even though they claim about censorship when it happens to them, as do I. But yeah, that video, I'm glad I've like scrolled through that because you can pause and read that. So this video is essentially preserving that Wikipedia page. But anyway, Harold Malgren, he was like a child prodigy. He was like so brilliant. I mean, when he was a little kid, he met this guy who was incredibly enthralled by how much he knew and gave him special lessons at school and eventually got him into university. He eventually, when he was only 27 years old, and he ended working in the Kennedy administration. And he possibly saved. This is what saved the world means, because at that time Kennedy was dealing with this. Kennedy was dealing with this awful situation with the missiles that had been placed on Cuba by the Soviet Union. And General Curtis LeMay, who was chief of the defense staff, or was it chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he's known as Bombs Away LeMay because he's incredibly hawkish. He was incredibly hawkish. And he was saying to Kennedy, bomb the USSR now. Just launch missiles at the USSR now. It didn't seem to bother him that I would essentially mean the end of the world and nearly everyone in the world dying. No, just bomb them now. Bombs away, LeMay. Curtis LeMay, you may know that name because he had a run-in with Senator Barry Goldwater, who they were close friends, which says a lot about Goldwater if you have friends like that, you know. But anyway, they almost fell out because Goldwater asked LeMay about the UFOs and Roswell and stuff, and he says, "Never speak to me about that again, Barry. I never want you to ask me that question again." So LeMay was obviously briefed in, but he sounds like a complete maniac. I mean, when he served for many decades. He was in World War II, and then he in the Vietnam War he was famous for talking about bombing North Vietnam back to the Stone Age. Yeah, but anyway, without going into the details, you can look them up on the video. But basically, the advice of Harold Malgren swayed Kennedy from going along with LeMay's firestorm that he was planning, which, of course, as you know, would have resulted in the death of not just the deaths of most people in the Soviet Union, but there would have been a retaliatory strike from the missiles in Cuba and elsewhere, which would have resulted in the deaths of most people in the USA and the rest of the world. But yeah, that's so he was maybe he's one of these unsung heroes, like the guy whose name I don't even remember his name. The guy in the Soviet missile officer who, remember when they accidentally loaded a training program into the real launch computers on the missiles, and he stopped it without realizing, completely intuitively. He said, "No, this is not a real attack. Stop it," because they had orders to launch back, which would, of course, a mistake would have caused World War III, and he stopped. I can't remember his name, but he saved the world as well. Often it's people like that. And the guy in the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was also a Soviet guy on a submarine who was being ordered to launch a nuclear torpedo at an American warship, and he didn't. He disobeyed the order of the commissar on board, and he says, "I'm not going to launch I'm not going to launch this torpedo there." So that was the equivalent on the Soviet side. But anyway, so he essentially played this vital role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But anyway, later on, he was involved in nuclear tests. Now, these nuclear tests, there's one particular nuclear test was called Bluegill Prime, and where they were experimenting launch. This is nuts. I mean, this is madness when you think about it. But it's part of what's called Operation Fishbowl. All these tests were named after fish. You may have heard of Starfish Prime, Bluegill Prime. They launched from Johnson Island in the Pacific. They launched a Thor missile with a warhead on, and detonated a sub-megaton warhead. That's 1 minute before midnight local time, and this means this bomb was more than 200 kilotons in power. 200 kilotons. I mean, that's 200,000 tons of TNT, which means imagine converting, say, something that weighs 200,000 tons. So, for example, maybe an office block in London. You just build a pile of TNT that size and you set it off. Probably it would do huge damage to the entire city of London, wouldn't it? I mean, it's a huge explosion. And what happened was there was Malcolm said something happened. There was there was this tag-along that crashed. Now, you may have seen Jeffrey Cruikshank's interview with Ross Coulthart. He talks about something similar happening in Australia. The Bluegill Triple Prime test was filmed with something. There was these two photographs, there's these two video clips. For some reason, they're called Kettle 1 and Kettle 2. I think they explained it in the video. I can't remember. Let's see if I can find them. Right, here it is. This is Look, right. This is a film. This is called Kettle 2. This is the actual video of this test in 1962. This nuclear bomb test.
To knock down.
That's Harold, and that's Pippa, his daughter, and that's Jesse. They're doing this interview.
This device, they call it. I said.
Do you see there? There is literally a little object falling. This is the nuclear fireball here. This UFO was very close to this nuke when it went off. This rocket with this nuke on it, this Thor rocket. And what he calls it, they call them tag-alongs. This is just like another name. It's like fast walkers or UAP. It's just another or Foo Fighters. It's just another nickname for UFOs. It's obviously badly damaged by this explosion, and it falls to the ground or to the sea.
The tag-along.
That's what you would call them, tag-alongs.
What else? I didn't react with shock.
No?
I thought, let's find out what
a bit further, and you'll see this was censored. Okay, here's a much better copy of it. This is actually the interview with Jesse Michaels, and you can actually see what this is.
If that's not weird enough, these videos were declassified to the public in 1998. At the declassification review, the Defense Special Weapons Agency, led by Dr. Byron L. Ristvet, applied a large white triangle to the
You see, this is the same film you've just seen, and there's just like something like someone's put a piece of card over this. This is called Kettle 2. This is the published version of the film you've just seen, which was previously classified. And look,
footage sanitizing it right where you can see the.
See, look, there's the tag-along.
The object tumbling out of the plume in the Kettle 1 footage.
There's well-known animosity between Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore Labs. Lawrence Livermore.
Well, how about that? So basically, what he's saying is that the original footage was published, it was given out to the public, so they were allowed to see this nuclear test, which was launched in 1962 over the Pacific, exploded at a very high altitude, but the tag-along, which was the nickname they gave these things in this program, was edited out. So back then, it's like the cover-up was already in place. They already knew what to do, and they didn't want people to see that. I mean, this is worrying. I mean, because this what Malgren talks about is the possibility we're looking at weapons here, some kind of weapon. Lots of FBI people headed for these tests, lots of other intelligence agencies. It's like they were interested in weapons development, and indeed, there's a possibility that this technology, basically from the crash, because there was a crash retrieval as a result of that, because this debris was recovered from that footage you saw, the Kettle One footage that was recovered, and what's more, Harold handled it. But this is where the idea is that this technology was actually adapted. It was back engineered by humans to create reproductions of space-based weapons. The weaponization of space. The weaponization of space. Remember Carol Rosin? You will stop the weaponization of space. Like he knew about it, didn't he? The guy. What's his name? The rocket engineer. He knew about it. They'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, Richard Bissell. Now, he was director of plans for the CIA. He was the creator of Area 51. He started the Werner von Braun. That's it. If you don't think about something for a while, if you can't think of a name, just move on to something else, and the name pops back in your head. Yes, Carol. This is what Carol Rosin was talking about in 2001. I reckon von Braun knew about all this. Richard Bissell, he was deputy director of the CIA for a while. And he was director of plans. Like I said, he started the spy plane program, the U-2, and others. He was involved in the creation of Area 51. Now, he briefed Harold into the secrecy. He said to Harold, this is what's happening. This is the truth of what's happening, and we're going to tell you about it. And then Harold was shown pieces by someone called Lawrence Gies. Now, Lawrence Gies, interestingly, who was a high-level intelligence or operation, I can't remember his exact role, but he's very high up in the establishment. He's the grandfather of Jeff Bezos. It's interesting how these things run in the family, don't they? But he handled pieces of the recovered debris of this tag-along. And he says it felt weird. It didn't feel like anything we know. And Jesse asked him what color it was. He says it's the color of something in space. It depends on the light. And he claims he had a psionic experience when he was handling these pieces of this crashed UFO. Psionic, of course, is a word that it's only just been coined, really. But I know you know what it means. It means like some kind of psychic telepathic connection, which has always been a common feature of these kinds of experiences. I mean, this is worrying. I mean, because it could be like Carol Rosin was warning that these space-based weapons, and indeed we're seeing this now with the creation of the Space Force. It's apparently not just for the purposes of deterring, say, Soviet missiles. And the Soviets, of course, were doing the same. It is about literally enemies from out there coming here, or the threat of possible enemies out there being used by the government to justify increased authoritarianism, the New World Order, the fake alien invasion. But supposing we are actually using weapons that we are capable of using against these UAP, and, for example, deliberately targeting them, because this did come up, and this is something that Harold believes. I mean, that is insane, and well, it's obscene, obviously. I mean, there's the moral issue, which, of course, but leaving aside the moral issue, what about the practical side of things? We are initiating hostile action, violence, against an intelligence that is superior to us and can wield more force than we can. If they chose to fight back, they could, and they would. It would go badly for us. I mean, combat between UFOs and humans, there are a few examples of it. I've discussed them on this channel, and almost all these situations, the humans come worse off in almost all those situations. Now, he talks about the Magenta crash. Now, this is very, very controversial, and indeed the Backslappers are always going on about this, because this is something that David Rush brought up at his hearing. Now, this is a very early example of a crash retrieval. Happened in 1933 at a place called Magenta in Italy. A craft came down. There were documents that were gathered by Mussolini, the Mussolini regime, and apparently Mussolini set up the world's first kind of UFO investigation department in his government. The Magenta crash the object was eventually passed over to the Vatican, and at the end of World War II, this was then passed over to the Americans. And that's really the tradition. Traditionally, the Americans have always been the ones you call when this sort of thing happens. But a lot of people say it's not real. I mean, the thing about it is it's supposedly a hoax, but I do recommend Robert Panotti, the Italian ufologist. He wrote it's like a half-hour read. It's an article. You can get it online. It's called The Fascist UFO Files, which sounds very dramatic. It's not really. It's very informative, but it talks about the Magenta crash, and indeed what was going on in Italy, into the fact that Italy had its eyes on the skies an awful lot. The government has having Mussolini was very interested in it, and there was these people he brought in to research these things, real life kind of like X-Files departments, as early as the early 1930s. So Malgren saw a video of an extraterrestrial being from Roswell, apparently, and he also heard that the information leading to these directed energy weapons and other things came from the aliens. And indeed, Jesse asked the question, are we in an alien proxy war? Because we don't want to be, do we? It's not a good idea to get involved in that. Again, not just for moral reasons, but also practical. We're jeopardizing ourselves, because if we start attacking the aliens, they will retaliate at some point, and they could grind us into ash, as that line goes from the day the earth stood still. Yeah, Steve Mumbling's always going on about the Magenta crash. Oh man, and maybe I should do an entire video on that. But read The Fascist UFO Files by Roberto Panotti, definitely. Now, what happened was Richard Dolan tracked down a witness to the Bluegill Prime test, David Noble White Crow. David Noble White Crow. As his name suggests, he is an Amerindian. I know, of course, crows are black, not white, so it's kind of an inversion. But yeah, according to him, because he was on the ship, he was a Navy sailor. He witnessed this in 1962. He's not really old now. I mean, he's in his 80s. He'd have to be alive at that time. But he claims that one of the aliens that was captured at Roswell, he describes as a turncoat. In other words, it betrayed its own people, its own civilization, because it's not supposed to share information with humans. I don't know. But anyway, on the 13th of February, Harold Malgren died. He died. I've been looking into him a lot since I watched that video. I mean, there's other YouTube clips of him speaking on other subjects, because he was a major. He studied politics. He was a scientist. He studied physics. He was also studying international politics and things like that. And he's got a hotline to Putin. He met President Putin. He can call him anytime he likes. He talked to the Chinese premier, the Japanese prime minister, all those people. And so it looks like he decided he knew he was going to, well, he says at some point he hopes to recover, but it's pretty obvious he thought it was likely he would die. And he's 89 years old. He decided he would, he would end his existence on this planet with giving out the details about UFOs, which is very brave of him. So do look at Presidential Advisor. I handled UFO material featuring Harold Malgren on Jesse Michaels' YouTube channel. There was another whistleblower. Now this was on Disclosure Team. Right, this is Disclosure Team. This is the second of these 4 whistleblowers. I was going to say 3, but there's 4 of them. Now I do recommend this. This is very interesting. I do recommend this channel, Vinny. I've met Vinny. Well, he appears in one of my videos, doesn't he? If you remember, he appears in one. I think it's the one I went to Blackpool. A streetcar named Stargate. That's what the video's called. And this is him. This is his.
Since my sighting,
as you can see, he's he's insisted on the highest level of facial distortion. You can hardly hear his words because he's insisted on the highest level of voice distortion too.
And I, wanted to, especially after 2017, after the New York Times article came out, wanted to research more. I was eventually able to find
this is like an hour and 19 minutes. His name's Ben. The name he gives is Ben. And before anyone asks, it's not me. All right, it's not me. I'm sure some of you will say that. But he's an interesting chap because he says some people claim to know who this guy is, and he seems to be in with the usual team. He mentions the name of other whistleblowers, David Grush, Chris Alito, Ryan Graves, Lou Elizondo, etc. He talks about them a lot. He says he saw UFOs in his personal life, so he's seen them himself. He has a security clearance is not very high, but he accidentally came across, apparently, incidentally, he says he came across this subject. This is because of his conversations and his work with his connections, his conversations, and the fact that he has colleagues who are basically, he talks about the people named in Ross Coulthard's book, which is what's it called again? Oh, I've read it. I've even reviewed it. I can't remember its name. It'll come to me. But he's the people who are named in there. And he says there are a lot of UFOs at active military flashpoints. And he says this is to do with the presence of possible nuclear exchange. And this is, again, a pattern we see quite a lot in the UFO world. This is something you see repeated over and over again. But he says it's very interesting because he essentially accuses Sean Kirkpatrick, who was the former head of Arrow, of basically breaching his own mandate as head of this organization. So what he said, he would resolve. Sean Kirkpatrick was too eager to resolve cases to quote unquote in favor of the Pentagon unquote, rather than to do a scientific study. Now, isn't this exactly the accusation that J. Allen Hynek made against the leaders of Project Blue Book before, in the pre-Ruppelt era? This is like 50 to 60 years ago. He was making these same complaints. I find that interesting, shall we say. But he said quite clearly, Sean Kirkpatrick was read into the legacy program, which is against his mandate. He's not supposed to be. He's not supposed to have anything to do with the Pentagon. It's supposed to be. It's a Department of Defense project, but it's supposed to be independent. That was the mandate of the whole Arrow project. That's what it was all about. And so, again, this matches a lot of people said a lot of people. Sean Kirkpatrick has had a lot of criticism from the ufology community, and this could be why. Maybe he deserves it. Now, the third one, I was going to say the last. It wasn't the last. It was going to be the last. But there's this guy, and Jeremy Corbell interviewed him with George Knapp. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and it's this guy here. This is really well known. You've probably seen it. But this is the whistleblower who brought us Immaculate Constellation. I've talked about Immaculate Constellation before. It's on the not vetted on the weaponized YouTube channel. Here you go.
And we will hear testimony today concerning recent revelations about a purportedly secret UAP program whose existence and
this is him. You'll see him.
Let's talk about secrecy and the UAP topic. Shouldn't it be secret to some degree? I mean, we have there's a race for the technology to try to understand it. We have
arguments to be made and have successfully been made for decades in this country that the American leadership and American people seem to be finding acceptable to be left in the dark about, where science, technology, and their military is taking them. This isn't just technology. This isn't
Immaculate Constellation, UFO Whistleblower Goes Public, Weaponized, Episode 74, Part 1. There's going to be more of this. This is why I probably need to do a follow-up video with this series before long. But this is this chap. His name's Matthew Brown, or that's the name he's giving. Now, I'm inclined to believe that's his real name. Because you can see his face there. He's himself. There's no distortion there on his voice or face. But he is the source of this Immaculate Constellation document, which apparently came from Corbell. It didn't come from Michael Schellenberger, though Schellenberger apparently claimed credit for it. And he was talked about in the hearing as the source of Immaculate Constellation. And this really pissed off Jeremy Corbell. And maybe he's got reason to be pissed off. But this chap is a young guy. He's probably only 30-something. But he didn't actually say exactly who he works for, but he said that he is employed by the Department of State, but he's seconded to an intelligence agency at the Pentagon. But he's motivated. This is interesting because he says he's motivated by fear for the country's future, the fear and greed in humanity. And he said, this is an interesting quote, "We've built an invisible prison around us. There is an internationalist force at work." He sounds like me. He's a conspiracy theorist. But he says we can turn it around, and he's willing to risk it. And he says he's risking a treason charge, which could lead to life in jail or even execution. You can still be executed for treason in the US. But he's decided to go public, and he thinks, like Bob Lazar going public, he thinks he can possibly protect himself for that reason, because no one will, if anything touches him, he's got like a dead man's trigger. But he's a clever guy, got a degree at university in international affairs. Recruited by the Department of State, went to the Pentagon. He's got a top secret, special compartmented informational clearance. But he said, this is interesting. He said he never wanted to be a field officer in human intelligence. And he says the reason is he feels he's too honest. He doesn't want to deceive people. Because, of course, if you're going to be one of these people, these spy, a real life active spy on the ground, you have to you have to do like Richard Doty did. You have to pretend to be someone's friend. You might even have to pretend to be someone's lover in order to get information out of them. And he wasn't up for that. It's an honest guy, he just didn't want to do it. That's what he says. Yeah. But he said he has been shown videos of UAP. He said he had a basic interest to begin with, but he stresses he's never been to a UFO conference. And he said that where he works, if you mention any of the whistleblowers, you're in trouble. Well, you mentioned some of them. He says this was never a policy that was written down, but if you mentioned David Grush, you'd be called into the office and given a bollocking. Not Lou Elizondo, strangely enough. And I'm sure the backslappers will love that. They say, well, you don't get into trouble for mentioning Lou Elizondo. That means Elizondo's a shill. UFO circle jerkers, wackadoos. grifters, mentioning no names. Praise the cash. So it was unofficial. But he came across Immaculate Constellation on it was what he called a spillage. There was an unauthorized. The file ended up on a computer it shouldn't have, and he saw it and therefore learned all about it. And he said, now it's interesting because at one point there's a name redacted. It's just he cuts it away and it just says name redacted because he talks about an official. Now Patrick, a vetted, thinks it's Kathleen Hicks, she was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Biden, and not something to be proud of particularly, but he says that she was involved in this, and because although Matthew Brown doesn't actually say that, but he does claim that he was shown videos of UAP. He was shown a photograph of a flying triangle in the Pacific Ocean above a fleet of ships, and he said they were monitoring a Russian naval activity in the area. This is in the West Pacific, near the coast of Siberia, and some submarines took photographs from a periscope, and this reminds me of the USS Trepang and those amazing photos that took it back in 1970 odd. And what's interesting, he says, it appears the presence of this flying triangle was the reason the Russians were there. It was like they knew in advance that this object was going to appear. Now that's interesting. This has led many people to conclude that this is actually some form of human technology rather than extraterrestrial. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But if you remember, this was also a factor in two other cases, oddly enough, two cases that were in Wales. One being the 1974 Bedouin Mountains incident, and the other, the 2016 Pentach UFO incident, which as you know, I've looked into personally. I was actually the ufological journalist who broke the Pentach story. Although I've never been credited for that, but I was. All too often, Jeremy Corbell is moaning about this with El Schellenberger. But, all too often the people who do things don't get the credit for it. There's been all kinds of fuss. What happened was, now Matthew Brown's been attacked by many people, including Timothy Phillips, who was actually Kirkpatrick's deputy in Arrow. And there's been some backlash against that. Lou Elizondo defended him, I'm pleased to say. But also, even Susan Goff actually said, the infamous Susan Goff, the public relations woman who's acting as a massive gatekeeper. She said, well, look, Timothy Phillips is no longer officially with Arrow, therefore it's his own opinion, not that of the DOD. But Timothy Phillips just says, oh, more BS, people accusing us of having a legacy program and we don't have one. Well, maybe he doesn't know. Certainly his boss was briefed into it, according to Ben. Yeah. Anyway, that was the first whistleblower. There's another whistleblower that's appeared. Maybe I'll come on to him later. But anyway, there was more. There was a bit of drama because there was going to. You may have heard about this agenda that was laid out by Nancy Mace. By Anna Paulina Luna. She actually did a press conference saying there was going to be a specific agenda. For example, there was going to be a SCIF a couple of days ago, a SCIF meeting with David Grush, and a couple of other people are going to be there from several other Congress people and that. Probably Moskowitz and Mace, Jerry Moskowitz and a couple of other people. But then this was going to be followed up by a hearing. Well, it turns out the SCIF was postponed. And no one knows exactly. There's a lot of questions over why that is. Apparently, it's because David Grush wasn't available. But pardon me. But maybe Grush was so important that they needed him there for it to go ahead. That's maybe understandable, considering he seems to be the guy who's often at the front of all these revelations. However, the skeptics and the backslappers are going nuts about this, saying it was all a big con to begin with, as they always do. But I think we should give it a chance, because the problem is if the SCIF has been delayed, the hearing will be as well. But it still may well go ahead, and I'll certainly cover it nearer the time. As I said, there's more I could say in this particular video on that subject, which I won't, because I want to keep this video quite short, because basically otherwise I'll be up all night and I won't get any sleep before work tomorrow. Forgive me, guys. This is just, I have an ordinary life. What I do here is basically a hobby. and I have a ordinary life outside it where I do ordinary things with normies, you know. Anyway, so David, the skiff didn't happen, but it may well still happen. And there's another one, which of course is, I'm afraid I'll come on to this I'll come on to it in detail when I go through the Twitter feeds. But Lou Elizondo published another photo that was wrong now, which turned out to be nothing. He was doing a hearing, and he was doing like a talk, a lecture. He held up a photograph, which I'll show you in a minute. And this, he said, was a UFO casting a shadow, and it wasn't. And unfortunately, this is not the first time Lou has done this. Lou Elizondo has also he's also published a picture of supposedly a UFO taken through a window. It turns out it's a reflection of a light from inside the room. So, and I mean, why he does this? Well, he provides an explanation himself. But of course, the backslappers are going to say, well, it's because he is because he's a shill, because he's just a confidence trickster. Okay, might as well go through my Twitter feed now. Now again, I could spend hours on this one thing, but we'll stick to just a few people here. These are In Plain Sight. That's the name of the bloody book. I should know. I've read it twice. Anyway, we'll go through his Twitter feed here. This Need to Know. There's going to be is there a new episode of Need to Know? That's good. And here we see Timothy Phillips again. This is Elizondo defending Matthew Brown when he's been attacked by Timothy Phillips. So it's always worth going through these people's. There's probably like 20 or 30 people I'd like to go through. This is cool talking about Matthew Brown. The FAA needs publicly to explain the statement made from the White House that egregiously misled the American public about the drone incursions. Oh yeah, he's Richard Red Panda Koala. I love our RPK. He's got a great sense of humor. He's a bit like Chupacabra, you know. He's kind of like makes jokes all the time. I like that. All right. Anyway, that's Cool Tart. He's going back to April the 29th there. Luminous UFO filmed, and this is, of course, that is Matthew Brown. There you can see. Okay, so let's go to John Greenwald Jr. Again, this is a guy I'm a great admirer of this bloke. I mean, some people think he's too much of a skeptic. I actually think he is. If the page appears, there we go. The Black Vault. I think he's actually quite a balanced individual, and I trust it. I do trust his judgment. I don't agree with everything he says. I certainly don't agree with him. I think he is a bit too skeptical, I'd say. But I think, you know, he's not like a skeptic like them, the skeptics. He will change his mind, and he will say, he'll be honest, and he will admit things which a real skeptic never would. So, for example, in 2017, when the Nimitz footage first emerged, he thought it might be fakes that had been made by students or something. When it turned out, it was revealed they were Department of Defense videos. He changed his mind. He said, "Okay, they're real." Doesn't mean they're definitely aliens, but it means they're real. This is Corbell talking to Elizabeth Vargas. Let's see what she has to say.
Into a secret meeting with members of Congress before IMCON was ever publicly revealed.
I must admit, I mean, obviously, part of my motivation is I really do fancy Elizabeth Vargas. I'm such a lech, I really am.
When did this all begin? How did you first meet him?
Let's go back to the beginning.
Joining us now is investigative
Can
journalist.
I actually watch all this without getting a copyright
host
strike?
of the Weaponized podcast, Jeremy Corbell.
I'm pleading fair. This is fair use.
To have you back to the show. So you've known Matthew Brown a long time. You actually even brought him into a secret meeting with members of Congress before IMCON was ever publicly revealed. When did this all begin?
IMCON is Immaculate Constellation.
Again, how did you first meet him?
Yeah, this started a long time ago. As you know, like George Knapp and I, when we work on bringing whistleblowers forward, first thing is protect them, even if they don't protect themselves. And
this is 5 minutes long. I'll get a copyright strike if I play the whole thing. But John Greenwald says here, No, sadly, we aren't in this together. It's clear to anyone with ears. You're in this for you and George Knapp, listening to your interviews. That's why you said over and over again, George Knapp, usually preceded by my mentor in journalism. Oops, what's happening now? Oh, it's been... All right, here we go. Oh, I see. We just want to watch the whole thing. Read the whole thing. Why it's important is you care about branding and name recognition, not truth and transparency. All right. Now, this is... I'm not going to dwell on this because this is drama. I know very well that Jeremy's not perfect. I know a lot of people accuse him of all kinds of things, of being... I mean, obviously, Cambion is the worst, but there's many, many others. Even people who are like not necessarily on Cambion's side, in the Backslapper fraternity. But there's people who accuse Corbell and Knapp of being, like, say, dishonest. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on the drama of it all. This doesn't mean I don't go along with that myself. I don't believe every word they say, but I'm not going to denounce Jeremy and George for that. Actually, I met Jeremy at Contact. You remember very briefly, I saw him at Contact. This is the photo that Lou said, and John says here, just like that, a user on Reddit finds an exact match to the UFO photograph revealed today by Luis Elizondo at the congressional briefing. I've said a million times, the internet and some of its users within it are an amazing resource, and it is, of course, unfortunately, an irrigation field. It's just a field. There's two irrigation fields. One is fallow and the other is planted. But it looks like one's a saucer, and then there's this shadow beneath it. Yeah, and he says, to be fair, Elizondo warned ahead of time. This is unofficially smug. He could not vouch for the providence of the image. Right, yeah, and that's something I'll come on to, because I'm going to go to Lou Elizondo now and look at his feed. Let's see what he has to say. And there's so much more I could talk about here. He actually has made a statement, which I'll play in a minute. This is Elizondo standing up to Timothy Phillips when he attacks Matthew Brown. And this is the May the 1st. This is the official photo he took when he was at the briefing. Here we go. This is on YouTube. I think this might be it, because you see, I think people are a bit too hard on Lou. I mean, he gets accused of shillhood more than anyone. People are always accusing him of shillhood.
Hi, everybody. Lou Elizondo here with another, what I consider is an important update for you.
Let's just see if there's a clip. There's maybe a clip which I can look at. Oh, that's beforehand anyway. There's maybe a clip beforehand. Is this the one? DC briefing update. Is this one? Oh, the photo controversy. Let's have a look. This is 7 minutes long.
Hi, folks. Lou Elizondo here. I thought I'd take a few minutes and talk to you folks about a interesting week we had on Capitol Hill. For the most part, I think by and large it was very successful, but I do want to address something. During part of this forum that we had on Capitol Hill, right before we started, I was provided a photograph from a private pilot who had asked me, he was concerned that there was no real reporting mechanism. And we've known there's no real civilian reporting mechanism for private pilots to report UAP. And he took a
well, that's changing thanks to people like Todd Curtis, who I've just interviewed. Yeah.
And explained to me what he saw surrounding this photograph. And so I made the command decision right there and then that I would use that photograph as an example of why we need.
I'm not going to play all this, but he does an explanation, and I've seen the written form. He's just trying to explain himself. And to be honest, I think people are being too hard on Lou over this matter. They're basically castigating. There's memes and there's jokes, and well, there's Mick West. I'll come on to Mick West. Let's go to Mick West about this. Because just for the purposes of balance, I'm going to show you Mick West's feed. I follow. Needless to say, he doesn't follow me, but he's the kind of big time UFO skeptic. And again, he's backing up Timothy Phillips here. This is Lou Elizondo's post on Facebook. While many are now distancing themselves and others of what they perceive as a lapse in judgment, rushing to question credibility and sling accusations. This is the written statement I saw earlier. It was clearly stated from the outset that this image in question was not vetted. This disclaimer matters. When somebody acts from a place of empathy, solidarity, and brotherhood, sharing something in good faith from a source in hopes of answering the public's relentless demands for imagery that is human, we should be able to discuss these topics openly and study images together without the usual stress, theatrics, or finger pointing. And if it turns out the image wasn't what we thought, too bad. We should be able to shrug it off and move forward. Frankly, the way some people react with their self-righteous aggression suggests they're not ready for the truth. Maybe they don't even deserve it. While many are busy engaging in, arguing and expressing dissatisfaction over the images, always destined to be debunked and quote unquote and doubted into oblivion anyway, even quite ironically, as many demand if they came from the Pentagon with open arms, brackets the very organization that resists doing so and manipulates public's perception, close brackets. Just know this: to those who think they've won against disclosure and are doing a victory lap or sipping champagne, consider this your wake-up call right now as you run around unaware of what's looming overhead. Metaphorically speaking, there's an asteroid of truth 10 miles wide on a direct collision course for the Earth. No amount of mistakes, perceived loss of credibility, or disbelief will make it go away. Those who mock, discredit, distract, and make a career of endless doubt, the true disinformation agents, you're standing at ground zero. Now, as he talks about Göbekli Tepe here, this is supposedly a prophecy. I think that's fair enough. I think what Lou said there is fair enough. I know he's made a mistake like this before, and I did actually put a comment under one of Patrick's videos saying, Lou, you need to check these things first before you use them. I think Lou's explanation is just, and I think it's reasonable. And of course, the skeptics are going to jump on this. Of course, those who the anti-Lou brigade, which includes a lot of people in the ufology community who are denouncing Lou as a grifter or a shill or both. Of course, they're going to jump on this and they're going to seize this as an opportunity to lambast him, as people have done with me, if you remember, during the various dramas that I've found myself sucked into. Pardon me. Let's see what old Mickey has to say about it. Mick West says, the purpose, let me, can I do his voice? This statement on Facebook is not by Lou Elizondo, but it's going to fool a bunch of people. While it's not his fault, he's really well advised to devote more effort to getting that fake account removed or properly labeled. So is it not Lou's account? It sounds like the sort of thing he would say. That's fun. That's a shame. Right, John Kozlowski. There's so much I could go into now, and of course Mick West is going on about this whole thing. Black Triangle UFOs. You see, he's brought it up again here. Elizondo's UFO identified. This is the victory lap that Lou or whoever that was talking about here. Elizondo claims the irrigation circles in his photo are giant silver lenticular lens-shaped objects hovering in the air. Oh, right. All right, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't... like I said, I think people do make mistakes. I've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. Lou has made a lot of them, but he has a rationale for why he presents this information. Possibly he shouldn't be quite... In my view, maybe it's better that he checks these things a bit more thoroughly or doesn't present these informations before they're vetted. That's what I would do probably, or at least I would say that this has just come into my possession. I'm going to put it here. This is what it looks like, which I think he did actually. But you know, I'm Team Lou. Definitely. Someone put up a poll saying, "Who do you consider the most credible person now in the UFO disclosure movement?" Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo. I chose Elizondo. Although by that time the majority were over for Stephen Greer, so it's kind of flipped the other way. So this scandal, this what's it called, irrigation field gate? No doubt someone's going to call it that. Is unfortunately going to be it's going to be put on a pedestal and it's going to be dragged out for as long as possible by these opportunist skeptics and backslappers. On the subject of backslappers, Andrew Johnson might not be one anymore. How many of you have seen this? This is his video here. It's something a bit more lighthearted. Let's lighten the mood a little bit, shall we? This is an interview with Andrew Johnson.
Welcome back, CFR Network, CFR News. And I have a returning guest, well overdue.
All right. That's Andrew Johnson. Let's something a bit more. Let's lighten the mood. Definitely. It needs to be done. Yes. Andrew Johnson, yeah. As you know, I mean, he's one of the king of the backslappers. But he's actually, I mean, he's like, I say Richard D. Hall is the godfather and grandmaster and emperor of backslappers. I think it's even possible that Andrew Johnson invented backslapping. But sorry, the Richard D. Hall invented backslapping. But Andrew is kind of like the princeling. He's the heir apparent. He's the crown prince of the backslappers. But he's done this really unusual interview, and he's expressing opinions that drive him dangerously close to that borderline where he would be cast out of the backslapper fraternity. And one of the features that defines a cult is the disciples are not allowed to ask questions. But Andrew is asking questions. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, Ben, what do you mean? People still ask me, what do you mean by a backslapper? Well, they say nothing burger, of course, as you saw in the title shot, in the title slide, but the image and the thumbnail. But there are 3 rules for backslappers, all right? Rule number 1, all people except the backslappers fall into 2 groups: shills or naive people who have been duped by shills. Rule number 2, anything the backslappers don't believe in is a psyop. Rule number 3, nothing in the world can ever get any better. The Illuminati have total power and can never be beaten. If anything happens to make it look like the Illuminati are losing power, it's just a deeper and more devious act of the conspiracy that proves that their power is growing and they're winning even more. Only backslappers are clever enough to understand this and have the courage to face up to it. So Andrew has been obeying these rules perfectly for a long, long time. But then he said something about Trump that's very unbackslapperish. He says, I'm trying to work Trump out. He's complex. I'm not sure which side he's on. And then he starts talking about that little letter of the alphabet, you know. Got to be careful what I say. You know, the letter of the alphabet, it's after the 16th letter and before the 18th letter, you know. Anyway, it's 47 minutes into that video, and it's got like a timestamp on it, so you can actually see exactly where it is. Let's just see if I can find it. I think Andrew's not petty enough to hit me with a copyright strike or flag with a video, but somewhere.
We can let's
is just coming in now, and just this afternoon, I decided to listen to his inaugural speech, and you know, obviously Trump is a very, very divisive figure, and I'll be frank and saying I'm still trying to work him out. But I
Andrew,
think, you know, the front that he presents is very, very complex.
Yes.
And
Andrew, that's not what a backslapper is supposed to say. Oh, well, you know, I mean, Andrew, though, you know, it's Andrew's one of the greatest backslappers of all. So if he drops out, and he drops out of that fraternity and that community, that elite, it surprise me. I think he'll probably come back in a line, because I mean I'm not going to go on about it again, because you know I've fallen out with Andrew for reasons I've already explained. But he has turned against almost everyone. So what he did to Ian R. Crane is just what he does to his arrogance and paranoia has just driven him to just mercilessly denounce people. And he's mercilessly denounced dozens of people, even for minor failures of his ideological purity test. And many of them really deserve better. Ian is not the only one. I mean, Andrew Johnson treats other people like they're walking jukeboxes. They have to play the exact tune he wants, exactly when he wants it. Do you remember Ashton Forbes? Things like that. I mean, if he turns against the backslapper dogma, how should we respond? Because the other backslappers will shun him. And I've said before, we need to be ready to provide sanctuary to Michael Shermer because he's a skeptic, not a backslapper, but he is wavering. I know, and something happened recently that makes him waver even more. But I spoke about this actually. I've done a TikTok video all about that, which you can watch. It's on my TikTok channel, which is all about Michael Shermer's latest dalliance with the world of woo. Yeah. But I feel a lot less charitable towards Andrew than I do Michael Shermer, for reasons I've explained. Obviously, if Andrew Johnson develops a more open mind towards President Trump, he's on the right track. My personal relationship has broken down, but I still follow his career with interest, definitely. Now, moving on, Hal Puthoff has done an interview as well with Joe Rogan. And I've actually lost it. Let's have a look if I can find it. Because this is interesting. Now, Puthoff is another of these people in the formerly, I think he's still in TTSA. Well, TTSA is kind of a bit moribund now. It's kind of like old hat, because all the prime power brokers, that is Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, left TTSA. But where is he? Here we are. Hal Puthoff. I've not seen this yet. I've not seen it yet. I've seen. Okay, but
is wireless that let.
Here we go.
They are and see what it looks like.
Now,
tell us what you find and all that.
I should point out that I haven't seen this yet, but I've seen Patrick's review of it, and he talks about how Elizondo's Puthoff is talking about the age of disclosure. Now, this is a movie. I wish they'd release it. Everyone's saying, "Come on, you got to release it." Now, this is a film that's been shot in secret over the last few years. It premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and Joe Rogan has seen it. He was there at the premiere. That's the only time it's ever been shown. But apparently, it's going to be a game changer. Now, you hear a lot about this because, of course, UFO Wood is producing things like this all the time. I mean, I've reviewed so many of them. They come out almost every couple of months. There's the new James Fox, or there's other couple of new people. There's the latest Stephen Greer, things like that. You know, Greer's producing movies every 6 months now. This apparently is going to be different. Well, I'll know when I see it, but it's called The Age of Disclosure. The writer and director is a guy called Dan Farrar, who apparently is quite mainstream. He's worked with Steven Spielberg. Puthoff says it is dynamite. He says that this is disclosure on steroids, he says. And he says disclosure is going to come very soon. Now, you may have seen Third Eye Spies. You may have seen the all that disinformation and stuff to do with Uri Geller. I don't necessarily trust Hal Puthoff, but at the same time, I'm not going to ignore what he's doing. Ross Coulthart has done an interview, by the way. I don't need to show you this, but Ross Coulthart has done an interview where he believes that it's possible that another nation might be the Disclosure Nation, and I quite agree. This was on News Nation. This was on his News Nation slot. I think the most likely one is Russia. In fact, if Putin's got any sense, that's what he'll do. It could be another nation. It could be China. It could be any country could do. I mean, most nations have some knowledge about this. Most nations in the world have enough knowledge to do disclosure. That is the red line, as Richard Dolan calls it. Now, literally just as I was preparing this video, I'd done the titles. Information suddenly popped up that meant I had to redo the titles. There is a fourth whistleblower. This was going to be 3. It's now 4 whistleblowers. I had to redo the title and put the words 4 instead of 3. And this is where it all comes from. Now, this is archived for some reason. Apparently, this Daily Mail article has now been deleted. So we'll just have to go through it here. But it says here, top NASA official breaks 30-year silence to reveal sensational UFO footage of giant flying saucer secretly created by the U.S. Air Force. Now, this is interesting because this was actually Patrick covered this on Vetted. It says here, if you were the U.S. Air Force major who allegedly show the Rogers the eye-popping CCTV video at Cape Canaveral in the spring of 1992. All right, they're calling for this independent witness to come forward. Joss Boswell of the Main Online. I don't know why the original was deleted, but anyway. And as alleged, UFO footage and declassified CIA files on alien encounters flood the internet stratosphere. One ex-NASA top official has revealed exclusively to the Daily Mail that the US Air Force possesses a 20-foot gravity-defying flying saucer and claims he saw the footage more than 30 years ago. So it's dealing with the secret space program rather than aliens, but aliens do come back into it. Former NASA chief flight surgeon and Air Force Major Dr. Gregory Rogers, who worked with astronauts on several space shuttle missions, said he was shown security footage by another Air Force major in 1992 depicting the exotic craft levitating in a hangar. He kept the secret for more than 32 years. But following his retirement from the Department of Defense last month, has decided to come forward. Rogers, 68, said he wanted to back up other recent DoD whistleblowers who have told Congress the military has out-of-this-world spacecraft reverse-engineered from alien technology. I know exactly what I saw that day, and it was in no fashion a conventional flying vehicle, he told the Daily Mail. I have heard a number of members of Congress express their desire to hear more of the experience of any additional whistleblowers. Therefore, I'm presenting my story. I hope my report may stimulate others to reveal whether they have similarly witnessed this. And there's a video which we won't watch now of him dealing of this interview with this guy Rogers. There's his flight suit. A satellite surveillance photograph taken by the FBI investigation into UFOs. Right, that's like isn't that these lines here, these crosshairs, exactly the same as the Nimitz footage? I don't know whether it is separate or what, whether it's fake, I don't know. But you see here a distinct flying saucer. In the late spring of 1992, Rogers was stationed at the sprawling NASA facility at Cape Canaveral, Florida. It was the heyday of the American space program, a busy time of regular launches, high-profile space shuttle missions. As chief flight surgeon, Rogers was in charge of safety inspections on the base and medical care for its personnel, including the astronauts. Sometimes this involved jumping in a helicopter and fishing them out of the ocean as their capsule splashed down to Earth, or sea rather. One afternoon, around April or May of 1992, he was about to go home after inspecting a facility on the base where satellite components were assembled when an Air Force major, U.S. Air Force, approached him in the corridor. He says, "Hey, Doc, I've got something to show you that will knock your socks off," Roger told the Mail. He didn't recognize the man, but Roger's job involved caring for hundreds of patients, so he said it was not unusual to be approached by a serviceman who knew him, but whom he'd forgotten. The major ushered him into a room with computers, locked door, and closed the blinds. Right, I should point out, I'm thinking, what on earth is this guy doing? He sits down at a computer console. It takes several minutes, and all of a sudden the screen comes and this closed circuit television feed, and there is a picture. I think he drew that there. A drawing of the ship that Rogers mapped out for the Daily Mail. There's pictures of him. A recommendation letter for Rogers at the DoD, NASA. Right. The footage showed a standard aircraft hangar, just like the one that housed Rogers' chopper, except it's not my helicopter. It's a flying saucer, 20 feet wide, 8 to 10 feet tall, and a shallow dome on top. No antennas, no control surfaces, everything smooth and blended, no rivets or seams, just like Bob Lazar describes them. Now, what's this guy doing here saying, "Oh, I want to show you something that will knock your socks off"? How did he get authorization to show a flight surgeon that? I can't think of anything other than somehow this guy Rogers. The only reason I can think of is possibly Rogers was meant to be shown these things, and it was authorized. This declassification to Rogers was authorized. He was authorized to be briefed in, and this is how they decided to do it. Because I can't imagine anyone on the inside would just be walking down the corridor and someone's coming towards them, and they say, "Hey, come here! I'll just show you this thing for fun. Yeah, come and have a look at this, guys." You know, and there's no way would that happen. You can't just do that. Yeah, I want to show you something. Yeah, I know I'm not supposed to. It's highly classified, but I'm in the mood for a laugh. Let's just see what he says. Nah, that's not how it works at all. He says, "My mind was going crazy. Are you kidding me?" And he describes it here in more detail. You can read this article for yourself. The ex-NASA doctor said the footage showed several men in lab coats and hazmat bodysuits busy around the vehicle. I don't know why. Only some of them had hazmat suits, but there you go. So this sounds a bit. It's either this is like it sounds a bit incredulous the way he's saying it. And then he said, I hear and see things that look like electromagnetic charges. And then suddenly it lifted up as smooth as could be. Again, this matches what Bob Lazar said. It got 3 feet above the concrete surface, rotated completely, and it said he saw the U.S. Air Force insignia on it. He thought, is this one of ours? At some point, I asked the guy, why on earth would we design something like this? And he said, we got it from them, pointing his thumb up at the sky, meaning from space. Then something caught my attention. The craft tipped 45 degrees, but remained stationary, hovering in the air. That's anti-gravity again, yeah. And he said some fixed-wing aircraft like the F-35B can take off vertically, but only by using large exterior jets pointing at the ground. If a helicopter tips forward when hovering, the thrust of its rotors will force it forward. This is this is Dr. Rogers' wife there. That's her there, holding a picture of her wartime pilot father, Ellis Sappington. Oh, Rogers has a signed photo from the crew of the space shuttle mission STS-57. So it's interesting stuff. Here we go. And then he carries on talking for a bit longer, and then suddenly this door opens and a lieutenant colonel with 2 other guys in U.S. Air Force suits walk in and basically says, "What's going on here?" And he gets into trouble there. On his way home from work that day, Patrick, he thought to himself, there's no way on earth I can tell anyone that I just saw a flying saucer. This guy trapped me by showing something I didn't want to see. But as I said, I think he was meant to see it. That's me. I think Rogers were meant to be shown this for some reason. Either that or he's making the whole thing up. I don't know. Does he have any reason for making this thing up? Yeah. He goes on to... He talks a bit more about his space career. He wrote a 1995 novel about a fictional NASA crew facing the threat of which eventually struck the space shuttle Columbia. Yeah. So it sounds like he's quite high level. This is a long article here. I won't go into all of it. It goes into a lot of background to do with David Grush and things like that. But it sounds like quite a long article we're dealing with here. Right, guys. What happens next? Well, that's all I think. Just going to double check I've got everything in my notes, which I think I have been going through them very systematically. But obviously, I'll keep these notes just in case I found out more things. But basically, I don't want this video to be too long, because otherwise I won't get able to sleep tonight. But I'll probably do a follow-up video in the next week or so, or less, because there's so much more to talk about on this subject. Indeed, as events progress, I'll probably have to do an update anyway, because I think things are changing very quickly. There'll be a part 2 and a part 3 of Jeremy and George's interview with Matthew Brown to begin with, and there'll be lots more going on. And if I'm glad I waited to do this video, so I got that final 4th whistleblower on. But in the meantime, so there's lots coming up. I've got plans for a little trip as well, which I'll talk to you about later. And thanks to everyone who's been leaving comments. The last video I did was a reply to comments video, and there'll be another one of those at some point. So thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.